The day I opened Casa Marina was the proudest moment of my life. After 10 years of working every position imaginable in the restaurant industry, from dishwasher to sous chef at a Michelin-starred restaurant, I've finally done it. My own place, my own menu, my grandmother's recipes brought to life exactly as she taught me. I'm Sofia Martinez, and cooking isn't just my profession. It's my heritage, my heart, my connection to the family I've lost. When Abuela Marina passed away 5 years ago, she left me her recipe book, handwritten in fading ink, stained with decades of love and use. My brother Miguel got the house. That was fair, I thought at the time. He had a family to raise, and I had my dreams. You'll never succeed in the restaurant business, Miguel told me the day I signed the lease on the small space in downtown Seattle. It's too risky. You should stick to working for others. He was the successful one, with his accounting firm and his perfect house in the suburbs. The responsible one, as our parents always said. But I knew something they didn't. Every Sunday for 15 years, I'd sat in Abuela's kitchen, watching her hands move with practiced grace as she taught me the secrets passed down through generations. The exact moment to add the saffron to the paella. How to test the doneness of the sofrito by smell alone. The precise temperature needed for the perfect flan. La cocina es amor, she would say, her eyes twinkling. The kitchen is love. I poured everything I had into Casa Marina, my savings, my heart, my soul. The space wasn't much at first, just a small restaurant with seating for 40, but it was mine. I painted the walls the same warm yellow as Abuela's kitchen, hung black and white photos of our family in Cuba, and placed her recipe book in a glass case near the entrance. The first few months were tough. Some nights I'd serve only a handful of customers, but word started to spread. My ropa vieja made people close their eyes in pleasure. The picadillo brought tears to elderly Cuban immigrants' eyes. Just like home, they'd say, patting my hand. Miguel came to the opening night with his wife Clara and their 2 children. He seemed surprised by the turnout, by the warmth of the space, by how many people from the local Cuban community had shown up to support me. Not bad, Hermanita, he said, but there was something in his eyes I couldn't quite read. But can you keep it up? I did more than keep it up. By the end of the first year, Casa Marina had a waiting list every weekend. Local food critics wrote glowing reviews. Authentic Cuban cuisine with a modern twist, they said. A taste of Havana in Seattle. I hired more staff, extended our hours, started catering services. The recipe book became something of a local legend. Customers would ask to see it, pressing their hands against the glass case as if they could absorb its magic through osmosis. I kept the original safely locked away, working from copies I'd carefully made. Then came the call that would change everything. The James Beard Foundation wanted to consider Casa Marina for their Best New Restaurant Award. The nomination alone would put us on the national culinary map. They're coming next month, my sous chef Marco told me, his eyes wide with excitement. Can you believe it, chef? We might actually win. I called Miguel first, wanting to share the news with my family. He didn't answer, so I left a message. When he called back 3 days later, his voice was oddly distant. That's great, Sofia. Listen, I need a favor. Can we meet at the restaurant tomorrow morning, early before you open? I agreed, not thinking much of it. Miguel had been acting strange lately, canceling our monthly family dinners, not returning my calls promptly. I assumed he was just busy with work. He'd arrived at 7 a.m., just as I was starting the prep for the day's service. The morning light streamed through the windows, catching the dust motes in the air and making them dance like fairy lights. I need money, he said without preamble, settling onto a bar stool. A lot of money. I put down the pepper I was chopping. What? The firm, there are some irregularities in the accounts. If I don't cover them by the end of the month, I'll lose everything. The house, my reputation, maybe even face criminal charges. The knife felt heavy in my hand. How much? 200,000. I laughed, then realized he was serious. Miguel, I don't have that kind of money. Everything I make goes back into the restaurant. You could take out a loan. Use the restaurant as collateral. Are you crazy? This is my dream, my life's work. I can't risk it. His face hardened. I'm your brother. Family helps family. I'll help you find another way, I promised. We can talk to a financial advisor, look at restructuring options. Never mind, he cut me off, standing abruptly. I should have known you'd be selfish. Just like when you took Abuela's recipes instead of helping with her care. That's not fair. I visited her every week, cooked for her, helped with her medications. But he was already walking out, leaving me standing in my kitchen with shaking hands and a sense of dread I couldn't quite explain. I should have known then that something was wrong. Should have anticipated what was coming. But I was too focused on preparing for the James Beard visit, too excited about the future stretching out before me. The health inspector showed up 3 days later, during our busiest dinner service. He found violations that hadn't existed during our inspection just 2 months prior. Cross-contamination in the freezer, improper food storage temperatures, even evidence of pest infestation. I was stunned. My kitchen was immaculate. I ran it with military precision. But the photos didn't lie, and neither did the dead rat found behind the stove. The closure notice went up that night. By morning, local news websites were running the story. Popular Cuban restaurant shut down for health violations. My phone started ringing, reservation cancellations, concerned staff, reporters looking for comments. Then came the anonymous reviews online. Food poisoning claims. Stories of terrible service. Accusations that we were cutting corners, using frozen ingredients instead of fresh ones. But the final blow came a week later. Someone had broken into the restaurant during the night. Nothing was taken except one item. Abuela's recipe book. The glass case was smashed, shards scattered across the floor like broken dreams. The security cameras had been disabled. The alarm system switched off with the correct code. Only 3 people had that code, me, my head chef, and Miguel. I sat in the empty restaurant that morning surrounded by the wreckage of my life's work and felt something inside me break. And then slowly begin to harden. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. In my case, it was served with a side of irrefutable evidence and perfect timing. The month after Casa Marina's closure was the darkest of my life. I lost weight, couldn't sleep, and spent countless hours staring at the empty restaurant from my small office. My staff, my family really, tried to stand by me, but without income, I had to let them go one by one. Marco, my sous chef, was the last to leave. "I know you didn't do this, chef," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Someone set you up, and when you figure out who, call me. I'll be here." I nodded, unable to speak. After he left, I sat in the darkness of my empty kitchen and finally allowed myself to cry. The tears came in waves, years of memories washing over me. Abuela's hands guiding mine as I learned to make tamales. The proud smile on her face when I got my first job as a line cook. The way her eyes lit up when I told her I was naming the restaurant after her. "Marina," I whispered into the emptiness, "what would you do?" The answer came to me in her voice, clear as day. "La verdad siempre sale a la luz, mi amor." The truth always comes to light, my love. The next morning, I started investigating. The health inspection had been too perfect, the timing too convenient. I hired a private investigator, maxing out my last credit card to pay his retainer. "Someone wanted you shut down," he confirmed after 2 weeks of digging. The inspection was called in anonymously, with very specific complaints. And look at this. He showed me a grainy photo of someone entering the restaurant the night before the inspection. The figure was familiar, the same height and build as Miguel. But it was the financial records that told the real story. Miguel's accounting firm was in deeper trouble than he'd admitted. He'd been embezzling from clients for years, using new money to cover old losses. A classic Ponzi scheme that was finally unraveling. Then came the biggest surprise. 3 weeks after Casa Marina's closure, a new restaurant opened across town. Sabor de Cuba. The owner? A corporation registered to Clara, Miguel's wife. The menu was eerily familiar. My menu. Abuela's recipes. I drove there one evening, sat at the bar, and ordered ropa vieja. The first bite confirmed my suspicions. This was Abuela's recipe, down to the secret blend of spices that only she and I knew. I counted 3 of my former staff working there, looking uncomfortable when they recognized me. The pieces fell into place. Miguel hadn't just wanted to borrow money. He needed a new business to hide his illegal activities. When I refused to risk my restaurant, he'd simply taken it. The health inspection, the social media attacks, the theft of the recipe book, it was all part of his plan. I gathered evidence methodically, carefully. Security footage from nearby businesses showing Miguel entering Casa Marina the night before the inspection. Bank records showing transfers from his firm to pay for online review attacks. Testimonies from former employees about being offered jobs at Sabor de Cuba before Casa Marina even closed. Then I waited. It took 6 months. 6 months of watching my brother run my grandmother's recipes into the ground, of seeing him cut corners and cheap out on ingredients. 6 months of him parading around as a successful restaurateur while I worked as a private chef to make ends meet. The call came on a Sunday morning. Miguel's voice was desperate, broken. "Sofia, I need to see you. Please." We met at Casa Marina. The space was dusty, the windows grimy, but the warmth remained. Or maybe that was just my imagination. Miguel looked terrible. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his face gaunt. "The restaurant's failing," he said without preamble. "We're losing money every day. The recipes, they're not working like they should." "Abuela's recipes always work," I said quietly, "if you follow them correctly." He flinched. "I know you must have copies. The book, the original, was damaged in a kitchen fire." He couldn't meet my eyes. "Help me, please. If Sabor de Cuba fails, everything comes out. The embezzlement, the fraud. I'll go to prison." I walked to the kitchen, my footsteps echoing in the empty space. The health inspection notice was still taped to the window, faded but legible. I touched it gently, then turned to face my brother. "You want my help?" I asked. "Let's watch something first." I opened my laptop and played the security footage. Miguel entering Casa Marina the night before the inspection, carrying a bag. The timestamp was clear. More footage showed him leaving 2 hours later. "The cameras were supposed to be off," he whispered. "The main ones were. But I had a backup system installed after a break-in attempt 6 months earlier." "You didn't know about those cameras?" His face crumpled. "Sofia, I'm not done." I showed him the bank records, the employee testimonies, the evidence of the coordinated social media attack. "You didn't just steal my restaurant, Miguel. You stole our heritage, Abuela's legacy." I was desperate. The firm was collapsing. I needed something new. "You destroyed my dream." The words echoed off the walls. "You took everything I spent 10 years building and threw it away. For what? To cover up your crimes?" He slumped in his chair, defeated. "What are you going to do?" I pulled out a thick folder and placed it on the table between us. "This contains everything. The evidence of your embezzlement, the health inspection fraud, all of it. I'm going to the police tomorrow." "Please," he begged. "Think of my children. Think of the family. I am thinking of the family. Of Abuela, watching you destroy her life's work. Of our parents, who'll have to live with the shame of what you've done." I took a deep breath. "But I'll make you a deal." He looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "Sign Sabor de Cuba over to me. Every share, every asset. Confess to the health department about framing Casa Marina. Once my name is cleared, I'll help you make arrangements to pay back the people you stole from. But if you refuse, if you try to fight this, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you did. You blackmail your own brother. You destroy your own sister's life." The silence stretched between us, heavy with decades of rivalry, resentment, and broken trust. Finally he nodded. "I'll sign everything over. Just help me fix this." 3 months later, Casa Marina reopened. The line stretched around the block. Marco returned as my head chef, bringing most of our old staff with him. The James Beard Foundation rescheduled their visit. Miguel pled guilty to reduced charges in exchange for helping the authorities recover his client's money. He's serving 5 years in a minimum security prison. Clara divorced him, moved to Florida with the kids. I send them care packages every month. Cuban pastries, just like Abuela used to make. The recipe book sits in its new glass case, restored as much as possible after the fire damage. Sometimes, when the restaurant is quiet and the evening light slants through the windows just right, I swear I can smell Abuela's perfume mingling with the scent of sofrito and garlic. Last week, I received a letter from Miguel. "I'm sorry," he wrote, "not just for what I did, but for never understanding what the restaurant meant to you. What Abuela's legacy meant to you. I hope someday you can forgive me." I haven't answered yet. Forgiveness, like a perfect ropa vieja, takes time. But as I stand in my kitchen, watching the sunset paint the walls the same warm yellow as Abuela's kitchen, I think maybe, just maybe, here's hope. "La cocina es amor," I whisper, and somewhere, I know Abuela is smiling. The critics came back. The reviews are better than ever. Casa Marina doesn't just serve food, they write. It serves history, heritage, and heart. They're right. Every dish that leaves my kitchen carries a piece of my story of betrayal and redemption, of loss and reclamation, of a legacy nearly destroyed but ultimately preserved. And when customers ask about the recipe book in its case, I tell them the truth, that some treasures are worth fighting for, that family is more than blood, and that sometimes the worst betrayals lead us back to who we're meant to be. In the end, Miguel didn't just lose a restaurant, he lost the chance to be part of something greater than himself. But I gained something precious, the knowledge that I am my grandmother's true heir, not just of her recipes, but of her spirit, her resilience, her understanding that food is love, and love, like the perfect sofrito, can survive any fire.